As I'm sure most of you have heard, the Bigfoot community is mourning the loss of one of the giants in the field, Dr. Jeff Meldrum, who passed away on September 10th, 2025. During this episode, you will hear my guest and I refer to Dr. Meldrum in the present tense, as this interview was recorded back on July 17th. During this sad time, please keep Dr. Meldrum's family in your thoughts and prayers.
Out in the woods, shadows creep slow. Footprints deep where no man should go. Cold winds howl through hollers and brooks. Whispers of Bigfoot in the way it looks. Myths, monsters, and bullets in the night. Under a pale moon, strange glowing light. Truth out there like a blade it cuts. Myths, monsters, and bullets run amok.
What's going on, guys? Welcome back to Myths, Monsters, and Mullets. If you have a paranormal encounter you'd like to share and you'd like to be on the show, you can email me at mythsandmullets@gmail.com. That means if you've seen Bigfoot, maybe you saw a UFO, maybe you've got ghosts in your house, anything weird, I want to hear it. mythsandmullets@gmail.com. As you all know, all my new episodes drop on Wednesdays. But if you'd like to hear them a few days early, all you have to do is head over to Spotify, become a subscriber there, and for $2.99 a month, you'll get early access to all the episodes before everybody else. Once again, I want to thank everybody for all the support you guys have been giving me. It's been great. We've hit 1,000 subscribers over on YouTube. Really do appreciate that. If you haven't yet, make sure you've hit that subscribe button, like a show, comment, tell a friend. That's the only way we can grow. Maybe we can get to 10,000. As you all know, all my new episodes drop on Wednesdays. But if you'd like to hear them a few days early, all you have to do is head over to Spotify, become a subscriber there, and for $2.99 a month, you'll get early access to all the episodes before everybody else. Don't forget, October 4th, the Ohio Bigfoot Jamboree in Ada, Ohio. I'll be there. Nevermore Hollows, Drunken Cryptids, Chumming with the Spirits, so many podcasters, so many vendors. It's going to be a great time. A lot of good speakers. It's all put on by Cryptids of the Corn. That's Ada, Ohio, October 4th, the Ohio Bigfoot Jamboree. I hope to see you out there. Tonight's episode is a good one. We have Jeff Davis on the show. I met Jeff up at Beachfoot back in July, where he was a speaker, and we struck up a pretty good friendship. So be expecting to see a lot more of Jeff on the show in the near future. And with that, sit back, relax, and enjoy the show. Welcome back to Myths, Monsters, and Mullets. I am your host, John Methenkamp. On tonight's show, we have somebody that I met in Oregon at Beachfoot. Jeff Davis, how are you today?
I am doing great, John. How are you doing?
I'm doing all right. All right. I'm starting to get like a summer cold, I think. And those are the worst. So I may have to mute my microphone every once in a while to cough. But but yeah. So Jeff, we met out at Beachfoot. You were one of the speakers. Why don't you tell everybody a little bit about yourself?
Sure. As my ex-wife said, that's my favorite subject, which is probably why she's my ex-wife. No, I also promised her when I make ex-wife jokes that I will then go backward and say, that's not true. That's not true. She was a better wife than I deserved. So I felt really privileged to be not only attending, but to also be asked to be a speaker. It's funny. If you look on paper, and I am not, by no means am I one of these people who says, if somebody has degrees, I will trust their word over somebody who is a self-taught student. I think some of the best researchers in the paranormal field, but in science too, are self-taught. And so if you look at me on paper, some people can be impressed. I have a bachelor's in anthropology and a master's in archaeology. And as far as cryptozoology goes, I spent many, many years working as a field archaeologist and a research archaeologist for the U.S. Forest Service, mostly in the Cascade Mountains. I worked out of a ranger district in Stevenson, Washington. I also worked for the Mount Hood National Forest. And at times I worked for the Umatilla National Forest, Umatilla, Oregon. Some people associate that with watermelons and Basque sheep herders, all good things. And so the other thing is that a lot of academics in talking about cryptozoology and paranormal just means something, a field of study that people don't consider normal, right? It's science that's before science. And so a lot of people with these degrees don't want to go on camera talking about stuff. And I got broken of that fear a long time ago. So oftentimes I do end up going on some TV shows having to do with the subject and talk about history, because I'm not afraid of ridicule. I've kind of passed that stage. So,
well, I'm wearing a fake mullet, so we're on the same page.
When I first met you, I wasn't quite sure, and there's this whole thing of don't be rude and ask. Sometimes I do channel my parents.
Yeah, I only wore it the first day because I wanted to make my point. I was there for Myths, Monsters, and Mullets, but
then Todd put on his mullet hat too.
Yeah, I promised him one a few months back, and I was like, I just kind of dropped it. I didn't bring it up anymore because I knew I was going to bring him one to Beachfoot.
Yeah, and what I talked about was something I generally, believe it or not, don't get a chance to do. Is I talked kind of research mode everywhere across the world, but more so North America, where we have Bigfoot research groups, many of whom are self-taught, and they're out there doing their studies, doing their experiments and things like that. And all too often, I'm sure you, doing all of the interviews you have people come on and say, well, I want to speak with authority according to legend, or many people believe, but they aren't able to actually say who these many people are. What is the source? Where did this writing come from? And so I talked about here in the Pacific Northwest, some of these early pioneers who showed up 1840s, 1850s, and that's when the native people were still living their traditional lifestyle. And they asked them questions and wrote stuff down. It's called ethnography. So there I was, able to access ethnographies and dictionaries and not translated documents, but some of these early explorers gathered legends and wrote them down. They get published, and that's true all across the country. And so I was just trying to stress for everybody there, wherever you're coming from across the country, Arkansas, Missouri, I guarantee you there was some nosy Parker in the 1840s and 50s asking the native people about their legends. It's just a matter of finding them. And I was also trying to get it across that don't be intimidated by people with university degrees. We all put our pants on the same way. Well, no, we don't, do we? Not anymore. But that's a political talk show.
I mean, I usually have my wife hold them, and then I just jump into them.
Then you get people, when they put on their shoes, they put on both socks first, then the shoes. Other people put on one sock, one shoe, second sock, second shoe.
That last way sounds like weird.
See? I was a kid in the 1960s and 70s, and that was one of these routines on the show All in the Family with Carol O'Connor, where the son-in-law, Meathead, put on his shoes and socks that way, and Archie Bunker stood over him telling him the very same thing that you'd like channeled Carol O'Connor. You're doing it, geez, you're doing it wrong.
Yeah. I want to bring up a point, though. I really don't think it was fair that you were able to drive to Beachfoot and I had to fly there.
I know, but if I come to Arkansas or Missouri, guess who's going to have to fly and then get a rental
Well,
car?
I'm in Indiana, so it don't matter.
That's true.
You want to come out to Indiana, then you can complain that I was able to drive. Actually, I will drive to, if it's within 8 hours, I will drive.
I'm going to stop myself before saying I would too, because we both know that somebody's actually going to contact you or me and say, "Hey, Jeff, why don't you come on out? It's only it's a 12-hour drive. It's only 4 more hours."
Right. And then 16 is only 4 more after that.
I know. Reach a certain point where I'm not even going to say we get old. We just get lazy and we indulge ourselves by saying, no, I'm not going to do it.
Right. Right. I hit that at about, I think, 12.
Yeah. When I was in my 20s, sure, why not? 24-hour drive? Yeah, let me load up on Monster energy drinks and a whole bunch of sugary candy and I'll do it. But not anymore.
Yeah. Yeah. So let's you and I spent a lot of time together at Beachfoot.
Yeah.
When I got there, the only person that I knew that I'd ever talked to was Todd. And I do want to thank you because you were the first person to come up and strike up a conversation with me. And I really appreciate that because I kind of felt out of place at first. And you coming up and striking up the conversation really helped me kind of feel like I fit in because I felt like I was the small fish there. Let's put it that way.
Well, it's funny, isn't it? Body language. You learn to pick out people who, yeah, they don't feel like they quite belong, but they know they belong. Will the group be accepting? I've been in that position many, many times in my different incarnation in the Army. That was one of my assignments. Was I was a military historian, so I had to travel from fire base to fire base, talking to soldiers, and I was always a stranger. So I felt right in talking to you because I could tell. Or was it the mullet? I don't.
I'm gonna just say it was the mullet. I mean, it attracts everybody.
At the same time, then once we're attracted, we think of Joe Dirt, and then we repelled.
Right. It's just a conversation starter. That's all it is.
Yeah. There were some interesting folk there. The gypsy lady and her husband.
Yeah, I didn't get a chance to sit down and talk to them.
They were an interesting couple. What they're doing now, they're in their 70s, and the wife of this couple, she found out in later life that both of her parents were descended from gypsies, as in like she's like one generation removed from singing gypsy songs around the campfire.
Wow.
And it was one of these cases that I'm familiar with where at a certain point the family said, we're going to assimilate to the point where we're not going to tell anybody and we're going to invent a false family. And what her husband did for her, and this was so cool, is he built her a gypsy trailer, a gypsy, not just trailer, but gypsy wagon house.
Yeah.
And it's done traditional design, and inside is all well designed and compact. They've got a little teeny wood stove, and they got a bed, and they got fold down furniture, and they've got Central European rugs and Persian rugs there.
Wow.
And two of them volunteer. I think they're in Bandon, Washington, and they just kind of run as volunteers, kind of a clearinghouse where people along the Oregon coast come to them with their Bigfoot or cryptozoology encounters. And so they run that as like a records source.
Right.
And they were just pretty nifty people. I enjoyed talking to them.
Yeah. Yeah. There were so many people having their side conversations. Sometimes it was hard I don't want to be rude. I'm not going to just jump in and say, hey, my turn.
That's when you go like this and go like, let me in.
Right. I'm not going to do that, especially with like Ron Moorhead and, stuff like that. it was really tough to get him alone for even 15 minutes. Luckily I did, but because there were so many people there, it was kind of hard to talk to everybody.
Absolutely. I think I told you, Ron and I appeared in the same TV show, but we had never met during filming, which is not unusual because this was a show called Alaskan Killer Bigfoot, and I was on source as a historian, and so they put out 8 episodes, and I was live in 2 episodes, and then another 5 I was a flashback. When they're sitting around the campfire and one of them says, "Remember what the historian said? Don't go into the woods." That would be, and Ron was in 2 episodes. They were different episodes, and I'm not sure if you were, well, especially doing all these podcasts, you meet people all the time who worked on shows as part of the greater cast and crew. Yeah, they never had a chance to meet or be
Right.
in the same episodes together.
Yeah.
And the other thing that was really nifty is when I first met Todd, it was at in a neutral setting. We were at somebody else's cryptozoology event, and so I published books on the paranormal, and so Todd was wandering around. I'm not sure if he was a speaker or he was just there as a participant, and he stopped by, and I didn't know who Todd was. And so, but he was a veteran. We were both veterans. And so we struck up a friendship from there. And a year later, he contacted me and said, "Hey, would you be a guest speaker?" And so I was happy to come out and not have to drive 8 hours.
Right. You got to go home and check on your cat.
I did. For those who are curious, I have a black and white cat. Her name is Ping. And she's my last connection with my father, who has passed on. She was his cat. And when he couldn't take care of her, I adopted her. She had been sick recently, several days at the vet, to the tune of about $2,000, $2,500. So I had to check on her, if nothing else, to protect my investment.
Right.
And
yeah.
but
so how did you get into the paranormal?
Well, my interest in the paranormal starts when I was a kid. And I'm sure something like this happened to you too. You saw a certain movie, even as a kid, that had such an impact that it kind of, warped me. Do you remember the old 1930s movie, The Mummy, with Boris Karloff?
Boris Karloff, yeah.
Yeah, and he's only in mummy makeup for about 2 minutes on screen. The rest of it, he's heavily made up, but he's a dried up animated skeleton mummy. And the movie deals with what to me is like an 11 or 12-year-old when I first saw it, the concepts of reincarnation, magic, ancient history, archaeology. You got kind of all combined into one experience. And it affected me. I went on to become an archaeologist, among other things. And the study of mythology and the traditions of magic, they're all part of anthropological studies. And so that got me interested. And I remember even when I was like 13 or 14 years old, I would go to the library and I would go to the adult book section, and metaphorically I haunted the metaphysical section for the next ghost book that came back from being on loan.
And by adult, you don't mean the one behind the curtain.
My library in Vancouver, Washington didn't actually have that kind of a book section. I don't know about your Indiana, I don't know.
Oh, it wasn't an adult bookstore. Okay. Totally different bookstore. Gotcha.
No. That came later. That came my first 3-day pass from the Army, but that's another story.
Yeah, well, we're going to try to keep it PG.
Yeah.
So you start reading the books and
Yeah. Um, and that also was kind of a shaping. When I research and write a book, what makes a ghost story interesting to me, and this I'd say this also is a collection about Bigfoot or other critters or legends. What makes it interesting isn't the phenomena itself. As I tell people, if you talk about, I opened my closet door and this gelatinous octopus-like thing shot out, and it wrapped itself around its tentacles around my head and put a snorkel down my throat and injected its next larval form into me. While that's kind of interesting, that's also the plot for Alien.
yeah.
And was to me more interesting is how the hell did that ship get on that planet, and how did these eggs actually survive for thousands of years waiting for human beings? The background, who's the ghost, what tragic things happened to keep them there. That to me is more interesting, I think, than the rest of the phenomena itself. I don't know.
Did you have a paranormal encounter though?
Believe it or not, all these years I have never actually seen an apparition, never seen a ghost. I've had everything else happen: hot spots, cold spots, apports, objects appearing, or you put something down and then it disappears only to reappear again later. All that stuff happened to me.
So do you do like ghost hunts and stuff like that?
Well, yeah, I do. It's one of these things where I do it as scientifically as possible, which means notes, taking lots and lots of notes and multiple visits as a process. So I don't do it very often because it's just really time consuming. And I owe a responsibility to the property owners to actually give them a written report.
Right.
I'm sure you've encountered people. There's nothing wrong with what they're doing. I wouldn't do it this way, but they go visit a place and they bring their gizmos, they unfold them, set them up, get video, get audio, and then they tell the owner, and then they like walk away. That's okay. I mean, you're not hurting anybody, but I was just raised, if you're going to do something like that, document it.
Yeah. Yeah.
And because it's so time consuming, I don't do it very often. I will, when I'm researching a book, I will go visit people. I will gather their histories and gather known conventional history on a location. And I save records. I had a research request yesterday. I've got 1, 2, 3, 4. I've got 6 filing cabinets of paper at my house.
Oh.
Newspaper clippings, notes, research projects. Yeah. I don't even know how many gigs of digital data I have.
Right.
Lots.
So the paranormal, you do some ghost hunts, but what about the cryptozoology part of it though?
Yeah, that it's so funny. When I was working for the Forest Service as an archaeologist, it was really frowned on by administration and bosses. Nobody came out and shook their finger at me and said, "You will not, if you see Bigfoot, tell anybody." But it was just bad taste. There was this very subtle pressure. And when I was working for the Forest Service, this was in the midst of this big timber sale boom, where on my forest they cut like 70% of the available trees, 80% within a 10-year period. So the mantra was get the cut out, get the cut out. And I did archaeology work where I went into places where theoretically nobody but isolated hunters would ever go and look for Native American or like Civilian Conservation Corps can dumps. So some of this was pretty old growth country. And I never saw anything, but I have to point out I never looked for anything either. And at the talk that I gave, I don't know if you remember, I talked about a local guy named Datus, Datus, Perry. And he was a local guy who had an encounter with a Bigfoot to the point where he actively went out into the woods. And this is like the 1970s, 80s, into the 1990s. And This was so, but what ended up happening is he was so sincere, but he came across as a crackpot. For instance, he collected scat, he collected droppings. And these days, people will send it off to a lab for analysis. The DNA testing is just getting cheap enough. But this is the 1990s. He kept it in a cigar box wrapped in newsprint. People thought he was a crackpot for that. One of the other things, I call it the Great Bat Cave Incident. There are all these lava tubes and natural caves throughout the Cascade Mountains. And so he wanted to improve Bigfoot habitat. So he went into part of the cave network, and he had these woven grass vegetable mats. He was putting those down for the Bigfoot to sleep on. And he noticed in one case there was just a very narrow opening from one passage, or narrow passage from one chamber to the next. So he got some dynamite, and he opened up the caves. But he was so intent on this, he didn't think that this was habitat. This was endangered bats habitat. And so there he was for his Bigfoot, real or imagined, making that cave uninhabitable for all these rare and endangered bats.
Wow.
So, and it turned out that his stepdaughter, I think, was one of the management at my Forest Service office. So, and you know, and people treated her differently for a while after that.
Well, that's not fair.
No, but this is part of that subtle negativity that again.
Well, yeah, I get what you're saying, because, you know, at work I'm the crazy Bigfoot podcaster.
Yeah, when I was when I was on active duty, I was the archaeologist who did Army stuff. When I was working for the Forest Service, I was the Army guy who did archaeology stuff. It just was. That was just part of the reality of it.
Yeah. So you've never seen Sasquatch before? No.
Although my dad had kind of a peripheral experience not too far away from where I live now. Is shut down, but there was an Army training camp called Camp Bonneville, and his National Guard unit was there over one weekend, and they were packing up their stuff to leave, and one of the soldiers said, "I got to go to the bathroom," but they were too far away from. In the Army, a latrine is the bathroom, so they said, "Well, use the green latrine, just go in the woods." So this guy kind of walked off into the woods, and he came back several seconds later screaming, you know, "Oh my God, oh my God, oh my God." And like he was holding up his pants. And he told them that he was going through the woods, and not too far into the woods from where he was, he actually came into another clearing that was the dump. And he saw some kind of reddish brown critters like going through the trash heap, and he thought it was bears. And then he stopped and got a closer look at them, and they stopped and looked at him and stood upright, and they were not bears. And so he turned around and ran back, and then everybody came back with him to the dump, and there was of course nothing there.
Wow. So It's been a while since I've watched Alaskan Killer Bigfoot. Let's talk about that a little bit.
Sure.
How did you end up getting involved with that?
Yeah, it was one of these things. I really enjoy working with a lot of these professional film crews, because they're because it's a tight business. It's kind of cutthroat. If you're not good, you don't get hired back a second time. So all of them are good, and they're all used to adapting to changes and things going wrong, and pulling things together when an ordinary human being would just throw up their hands and walk away. It's very much like some of the best military units I ever worked with. So I have been on a show called The Dead Files, which is a ghost hunter show. I was 8 episodes. And one of the director producers, his name is Brian Niffel. He split off from the production company and started working with another one. And he actually contacted me and said, Jeff, I really enjoyed working with you. I've got a new project. We're breaking new ground on this subject, and we need a historic researcher. Can you kind of join the team for not very much money? But you and a lot of people in the podcasting audience and podcasters know it's not the money that draws you to it. It's your interest. If you get gas money,
Wait. There's podcasters that make money?
I met one once. At least to hear him tell it, he makes money.
Huh. Wow, maybe there is a future in this.
Or you're doing it wrong, man. Go to podcaster camp.
Wow.
But Brian and I was in. I was engaged by the story. This verifiable through historic facts. There's a Wikipedia page about a place called Portlock, Alaska, also known as Port Chatham. Now, the Wikipedia page includes citations about things that happened there as part of the show. Now, like anything else, whoever did the Wikipedia article has some research that suggests things aren't true. But from where I stand and what I know, everything is true. As a matter of fact, I just got done talking to Brian, and I was one of the historic researchers on it. So I stand behind what I brought to it. So the place called Portlock is at the tip of the Kenai Peninsula in Alaska, as part of the Cook Inlet. Kodiak Island is not too far away, for reference for people. The historic record for this place begins with Captain Cook. He didn't physically land there, but he charted the area. Later on, one of his subaltern captains, a guy named Nathaniel Portlock, hence the name, actually landed. We know because they recorded the longitude and latitude. A little bit before Portlock landed, a Spanish explorer also landed there. The Spanish expedition, the next day after landing, they performed what's called the possession ceremony. The whole kind of joke of, I claim this land for the King of Spain. And the next day, several of the sailors... I do that every time
I use a new bathroom.
Pardon. I've got my laptop on my lap, so pardon me when you tell something that does make me laugh. Lost several sailors over the next couple of days, to the point where the crew was depleted and they cut the expedition short and sailed back down to California. Now, Portlock himself didn't die, but they had some odd things happen. And see, these explorers actually published their journals. I mean, that was how they actually came up with funding for the next expedition and to pay the bills when they got home. So Portlock himself records some oddities in the area. And it is later highlighting in the historic record later, about 1900, there's a fishing cannery operation that sites itself in what's now Portlock. And over the next 4 decades, especially during World War II, they expand operations. And in this later 40s, they have about 24 workers off duty, go up into the mountains to hunt. They don't come back. Or if they do, they find their bodies washed down into the lagoon in the harbor for the town itself. And the native people started talking much, much louder about Nantinak, the spirit of the woods. Things got so bad, they had rocks and logs rolling down from the mountainside into town and banging on people's houses. And just overnight, there was this group consensus. They abandoned the town overnight. The only one left behind was the postmaster. He had to wait for word that he could shut down the post office. And effectively, the town was abandoned after that. And so it's still owned by a tribal corporation. And they, in air miles, they're not too far away. But anyone who think about Alaska in like 10 or 15 air miles, if you're going to travel overland, it's a lot, it's hours and hours, if not days travel. And so the only way to get there is by boat. And people have landed there. As a matter of fact, Somebody doing a YouTube search will find numerous people who claim to have been to Portlock, or they charter a boat and then they jump off the boat and they stand on the beach and film themselves with a selfie stick, and then they run and get back on the boat because they're trespassing. The land belongs to the tribe. Now, the tribal entity in Nanwalek, they're slowly outgrowing the actual land that they own. And so they wanted to find out whether or not it's suitable for them to restart the fishing operation, the canning operation, and to make sure that Nantinak isn't going to kill people again. And so that's part of the premise behind this.
So without seeing Sasquatch, what are your thoughts on it?
The thing that is engaging to me, strictly academically, is the historic record. This is a case. This is a case where, long before media wanted there to be Bigfoot, the native people were talking about it. Recently, talked to one of the I hesitate to say cast members, but DJ, the cook, the camp cook, is a native person, and he showed me a kind of an archive as a published book, where several decades ago, as a school genealogy project, the school kids went to the elders and gathered stories about Portlock and Nanwalek, and it included stories of Nantinak. So, this is before the media hype. And that is what is so fascinating, and it gives it, to use the expression, it gives the story legs, is right. Because this is prior to YouTube, and it's prior to the internet, and many of the stories, the kind of the guts, the character of Nantinak and the incidents and powers and all that, it is very much in line with other Native American traditions throughout the Pacific Northwest. So just like I say to people, what about ghosts? Virtually every country, culture in the world believes in ghosts, and except now our own Western scientific-based society. But if you have all these cultures believing in it, there must be something to it.
Right. I mean, when people like you and I, that look like you and I, landed here, the natives would tell them about the deer and the bear and the wolf. And they were like, "Oh yeah, that sounds right." And then they talk about the Sasquatch, and it's like, I don't know about that.
Yeah, and isn't it ironic with cryptozoology and modern genetics? When I went to school, there was Homo erectus, my finger up and up high enough to see. Yeah, there's Homo erectus. There was Neanderthal man, and there was modern Homo sapiens. That was it. And they were all three separate species. And now we know, Homo erectus set aside. We've got Homo floresiensis, the quote hobbit people found in Southwest Asian islands. We have Denisovans, I guess Homo denisovan, who we know humans could interbreed with because we've got the genetic evidence. We know Neanderthal people interbred with modern humans. If you get a 23andMe or any of those genetic testing things, they'll tell you what percentage of you is Neanderthal and modern humans. And there's now discussion that maybe there were one or two other human subspecies. So why not a collateral cousin that you couldn't call homo meaning human, but is still a cousin that we weren't aware of, simply because science should advance. Sorry if I'm talking and sounding like Charlie Brown's teacher, wah, wah, wah.
No. I was going in a different direction here.
Okay.
Not only, though, we talk about Sasquatch or Bigfoot, and most people think, well, that's California, Pacific Northwest. But this is not just a North America thing. You have the Yeren and I'm drawing a blank on what they call it in Russia, the Yowie in Australia. You hear of these things all over the world. Why do you think that mainstream science is so against even looking into this stuff?
because they don't want to look silly. And they should be courageous. I mean, when you think about some of these European explorers going to Africa looking for this beast that sort of had the legs of a zebra and the neck of a giraffe and the body of an antelope, and everybody said, "No, you're crazy," and then they bring back an op copy.
Right.
I encourage your watchers. There are various websites that are related to cryptozoology, where what's the cryptozoology find of this year? And oftentimes it's small animals that have been recorded and thought to be extinct for 100 years. Nope. We were out in the boondocks and we found this critter. So
Yeah.
the coelacanth, a living fossil, the old coelacanth fossils, tens and tens of millions of years old, and yet it's still out there. And this is a sad thing about historic research or science, where somebody stakes their reputation. You get A plus B plus C, but you make this jump, A, B, and C, but you make this jump to F. And you stake your reputation on it. And you know what? That's okay. But when somebody finds D and E and they lead to G or H, one, the person who was wrong may not want to admit they're wrong. And two, the critics won't let them. Then their reputation suffers because, well, you're not trustworthy because you got it wrong. You have a certain number of facts and you're called upon to reach a conclusion or a guesstimation. People should be forgiving of that. I mean, as a historic researcher, I've looked at some of my own papers, and my master's thesis was on the Vikings in Greenland. And I will tell you this for nothing, 45,000 words on the Vikings in Greenland. I was hitting the books pretty hard. But in the 30 or so years since then, of course, more stuff has been found. Or Google Books. Google Books has now translated these historic documents that weren't available to me. So shouldn't I be allowed to go back and say I was wrong because I didn't have the research? But yeah.
Yeah. And it kills me, the people that are, and I'm sure I've got people that's going to watch this episode, and I might make them mad when I say this. The people that they watched one or two YouTube videos and now they're experts. And well, this guy's a fluke or a freak because he doesn't agree with me. That's not how science works either. It's a free flow of information to learn, and people have forgotten that's how science works. And I'm not trying to get political, but when a certain president used the term "the science is settled," that's an oxymoron.
Mm-hmm.
Science should never be settled.
Yes.
Science is about continually learning and testing, and you can never say science is settled. That's my opinion.
Yeah.
As a non-scientist.
Which is why I encourage people to be self-taught, is because they're not contaminated by some bad habits and traditions. There are different models of what the scientific method or how it's supposed to work. But I'll do the diagram, right? But you start off with a hypothesis, an idea, and then you test the idea. And here's the thing. Yes, you gather information that supports your idea, but you look hardest for information that says, no, your idea is not entirely correct. You look for what they call refutation, refute. And then you take the supporting data and the anti-data and you refine your hypothesis, and then you test it again. And when you have people who, for whatever the scientific question is, who say, we're not going to do any more about this because it's an emergency or we don't have any money, that's one thing. But when they actively stop other people who have money or have the time from testing, that's just wrong.
Right. And you see, and I see this, and I'm not not a scientist, but I see that with when it comes to even cryptozoology and stuff like that. People, whether it's shaming or making sure that that funding's not available to do that, to do any kind of investigation or scientific studies, you know, that's wrong. If you call yourself a scientist, you should welcome ideas that are outside the box.
Absolutely. If nothing else, just entertain it for the with the comedic value. Because
Well,
you know, you don't get a group of people who if not believe something, at least are willing to discuss it without there being something to it. Same thing about how many cultures across the world believe in something like Bigfoot. Must be something to it. Believe in ghosts. Let's look and see what there is to it. This is what stops some university people. I'm sure almost everybody who's watching this knows the name Jeff Meldrum. And Jeff Meldrum is a tenured college professor, anthropologist, PhD, professional papers and all that. And he is one of these people who's willing to entertain the idea that Bigfoot is real. Not every Bigfoot reported is, but he's willing to do that. And he suffers a little bit from that. But he inherited that mantle from a guy named Grover Krantz, who was a professor at Washington State University. This is back starting in the 1970s. And so he paid an academic price for being open to that. I remember I went to Northwest anthropology conferences, and there was almost always a symposium about Bigfoot and hominids. In Russia, he reached out to Russian academics about Bigfoot. And my boss kind of shrugged and said, oh, they're just doing this as a favor to Grover because he just got tenure. But that was the way they phrased it.
Wow.
So things have come a long way. If not acceptance, toleration.
Talked about the historical accounts of Sasquatch and different cryptids and things like that. Do you feel that there are more encounters now, or were there more encounters in the past?
That's a great question. And I cannot answer it fully for some reasons, because that's a professional question. And so I'd have to look at raw data. Now, here's some things to consider. The actual population that would come forward, the population of the United States 100 years ago or even 50 years ago versus today, vastly different. So today, one person in 10,000 sees and makes a report about it. I'm throwing that out there. So what if it had the same proportion, 1 in 10,000 50 years ago? You're going to have fewer reports in numbers, but proportion of the population, that's different. Also, America's population was a lot more rural 50 years ago, so the odds of actually having a Bigfoot encounter were probably higher 50 years ago. People going out into the virgin woods and hunting, we don't have as much of that anymore. Then again, counter to that is because of more acceptance level today, more people are willing to come forward and talk about it.
Yeah, that's how I feel. I feel that I don't know that there's more. I think that, like you said, it's more accepted. And two, we have this magic box that you and I are talking on right now called the internet.
I'm an AI simulation, by the way.
People with like minds can get together that normally wouldn't get together. I mean, you and I would not have met without the internet.
That's very true. And our inquisitiveness, and again, getting to more common acceptance, people are more willing to be open to actually taking the effort to leave their house and travel to gatherings and conventions and conferences, or tune into a podcast. I agree. So I know there are more reports being made now than 50 years ago. And we just have to parse out whether or not the proportion of people having encounters is the same now or increased. I don't know, but certainly a willingness to talk is.
Right.
See, I said yes and no at the same time. That makes me a government expert.
You worked for the government at some point. We can tell. Oh, yeah, you already said you did.
Yeah, I did. Yeah. And I'm master yet.
Well, all right.
Behave. Yeah.
Yeah. We don't want to get you in trouble, man.
No, I can neither confirm nor deny any affiliations with the United States government at this time.
Okay. That's a very political answer.
I was actually on a podcast with somebody, and they actually did ask or comment on the wrong question. And so I had to pause trying to figure out the non-committal answer. Please don't get me wrong. I was nothing like a spy or anything like that, but I was a military historian. I traveled and talked to people about military operations. And at the time and now, these interviews are classified mostly because it's protecting people's names. And so these history interviews that I did a couple decades ago, I may actually be alive if I eat a whole bunch of high fiber cereal and give up smoking and booze. I may be alive when they're declassified.
But we're not doing that.
No, I'm not giving up the booze.
So working in the field that you did, what do you think of the reports of that they were using Black Hawk helicopters, or they were using helicopters to airlift Sasquatch out of the blast zone of Mount St. Helens?
Well, that was May 1980. And you know what? I was in the Army Reserve at the time. And I was to the southwest of Mount St. Helens. As a matter of fact, I was at this same Camp Bonneville place I talked about a little while ago, my dad's encounter. And it's in kind of a bowl, a mountainous bowl. We didn't even hear the blast. We didn't see anything. We didn't see the 90,000 foot high cloud because the hills and the trees were in the way. When we left, we saw it. And that's another one of these weird phenomena where you have this blast and the sound travels so fast that it's like there are dead zones where people never heard it. Getting back to your question, I had friends in the National Guard who they activated the National Guard units and put them in trucks and sent them northeast of Mount St. Helens and into Mount St. Helens. And depending on how you want to feel about this, nobody reported seeing any Bigfoot. There were really sad reports. There was, after the explosion, there was a pyroclastic flow where the lava was actually a gas. And one person I remember talking about, there was a herd of elk that were just like standing out in the open. And he got really close to them, and then they like realized there's a human here, and they turned and ran away. And the other half of them was bald, where the pyroclastic flow was on one side, and it burned off all their fur on one side. And they were blind on that side too. And so there were these horrific things. There was somebody else was talking to me about how the water was boiling. The streams were all full of steam, and the fish jumped out of the water because of the heat, and then they suffocated along the stream banks. I am pretty certain, consider this, they rerouted airplanes around the volcanic ash cloud because the ash destroyed the intake for the motors. So I myself would not want to be a helicopter pilot flying around Mount St. Helens right after the eruption, ferrying away Bigfoot.
Right.
Because my helicopter would probably stop working and I would crash and die.
Right. That was kind of a...
Was that a test?
It wasn't really a test. You know, you have some experience in the military. You're from that area. We're talking about Bigfoot. And that is one of the internet theories or internet stories that you hear. And I thought, who better to ask?
Yeah, I like just about anything else. I'm the one, you and I are both the ones talking about being open-minded and not just dismissing stuff out of hand. But those are real considerations that must be taken into account.
Right. Right. Wow. We've been doing this an hour already. This kind of reminds me of when we were at Beachfoot.
Yeah.
We look up and holy cow, we've been talking for an hour.
And everybody's already kind of left to go off to do 1960s karaoke music.
Well, we haven't even mentioned your podcast.
Yeah. Regionally, here in the Pacific Northwest, there's a broadcaster. His name is Clyde Lewis, who has his own nightly AM radio show on the Odd and Unusual. And he also hosts a podcast network called GroundZeroPlus.com. And so right now I'm actively trying to gather podcasts. It's audio, not video, to kind of plug into there. But I'm already on that network. I had a podcast 6 or 7 years ago. They're airing older podcast episodes. And hopefully by next Sunday, my new podcast will start airing. Just go to groundplusradio.com and look for it. If you want to contact me directly, my website is jeffdavisghostguy.com. I have a ghost walk business. I do personal appearances, and I research and write books on all the odd and unusual. So you can find me there.
Well, Jeff, I really do appreciate you coming on tonight. We're going to have to do this again, though, because we've barely scratched the surface of anything that we talked about at Beachfoot.
Yes.
So maybe we can have you back in the very near future.
That sounds like a great idea.
All right. Well, do you have any parting words for my audience?
Don't trust the establishment.
He's part of it.
Eh,
It's smoke and mirrors. Smoke and mirrors.
that's right. Well, that's how you hide the conspiracy, is within a conspiracy. Don't trust anyone over 18. I'm trying to remember all these really bad 1960s sayings.
Right. I wasn't around then. Sorry.
It was barely. Anyway.
Yeah. Anyway.
Be intellectually honest with yourself. It's probably we're human. We will be wrong. That's about the only thing I'm 100% correct on is we're all going to be wrong. Stake your reputation if you want, but be prepared for new facts to come along, and don't be hard on yourself. All these years I was in the Army, that's like what I just said is like treason, but is so true.
Right.
So
right.
Be excellent to each other. Yeah.
All right. Well, Jeff, once again, thank you for coming on Myths, Monsters, and Mullets. And if you have a paranormal encounter you'd like to share and you'd like to be on the show, you can email me at mythsandmullets@gmail.com, and I'll put all the links to Jeff's show in the show notes. Till next time, I'll talk to you later. Gotta go.
Bye, everybody.
Shadow in the pines lurking in the dusky air. Bigfoot stomps through the woods like he don't care. Lights in the sky flash green then blue. Aliens descending with a secret or two. Whispers in the breeze, cold fingers down your spine. Ghosts in the graveyard, twisting through time. Eyes wide open in the dead of night. The myths and monsters giving one hell of a fright. Oh, Myths, Monsters, and Mullets podcast, spinning wild tales of a future and a past. Hosted by John Methenkamp's fiery soul. He takes us where the wild unknown flows. Oh, Myths, Monsters, and Mullets podcast, spinning wild tales of a future and a past. Hosted by John Methenkamp's fiery soul. He takes us where the wild unknown flows. Down by the bayou, Lord's house.